I was a Foreign Service officer, and I became an ambassador during the last 10 years of my career and served in 3 different places. I knew about the Asia Society. Anybody who had anything to do with Asia knew something about the Asia Society. I had spoken here as ambassador to the Philippines, so I had some background. And in the course of my career, I mean, I started out in China back in 1973, and in Hong Kong before that, but the American awareness of Asia is what really grew. And it came about as a result of the wars we'd been in, but also as a result of the economic and cultural awakening that was occurring in Asia. And so there was also a vast increase during the 80s and the 90s of Asians coming to live in America. And there was a vast increase in people's awareness of Asian culture. And they were all intertwined. My transition to the Asia Society was quite seamless as well, because when I was asked to take the job, which was in March of 1991, something like that, I said, no, you have to wait for me, because I can't just down tools. I have to tell the president that I'm his until the election. And I was in Pakistan as ambassador at the time, and so the society decided to do that. So in '92, I came, and the election occurred the day I left Pakistan, and the polls weren't even open, so I didn't even know the outcome. But I retired from the Foreign Service in the morning and came here as president in the afternoon. People asked me, well, what did you do between? And I said I had a rather bad lunch. The Asia Society's emergence as a versatile organization was already well underway. But what we did during my time was to trade on that. We did all kinds of different things, including these corporate conferences, which brought the business community together with government leadership. We also did a lot of track 2 things, in which we had behind-the-scenes negotiations with various different governments to try to bring them out into the mainstream. We did this with Iran, we did this on Taiwan, and things like that. So, and never lost sight of culture as one of our sort of main tracks. And in fact, as far as Iran was concerned, culture was the thin end of the wedge that allowed us to get in close and talk to people, because that was the one thing that was non-controversial about the relationship with Iran. Well, when I first got here, I made sure that we kept our lines of communication open with the Iranians, and I had been trained to keep lines of communication open with everybody, and I was very sensitive, having worked a lot on the China relationship, to other big relationships that needed fixing. And so I made sure that we knew the deputy perm rep here, who turns out to be the current foreign minister. I hosted a breakfast for him. It was controversial. There were demonstrators outside and so on and so forth. But when in 1998, the new Iranian president said he wanted to start a conversation between civilizations, I went down to the UN the next day and I said, hey, we volunteer. We also had a famous Iranian singer come, who was their equivalent of Pavarotti and Frank Sinatra rolled into one. And the idea was to try and attract people here, and maybe they'd talk to each other. We tried to establish ourselves with the Iranians as a static, free line of communication. We didn't have any agenda. We weren't pushing any particular policy. We just wanted to open a link. Educating Americans about Asia was what we were supposed to do. And here was this huge field, the younger children, looking for information and for knowledge about Asia. And we didn't have a particular policy axe to grind. We just wanted to broaden their horizons and fill them up with material. Well, the proudest moment, in a way, was the day we opened the renovated building. And that building, of course, is what turned my hair white. And this was a beautiful building built by a famous architect, but the insides of it didn't correspond to the role that the society had taken on. People have described this renovation as the biggest and most expensive architectural root canal in the history of New York architecture, because everything had to be done within the confines of what we had created, and it was complicated and it was expensive. But as you know, it was scheduled to occur. And then we had to raise a lot of money and all of that kind of thing. That also caused some whitening of the hair. But finally the time came, and of course the 9/11 got right in the way of our opening, and we decided to postpone plans for opening. And in fact, we weren't ready, and so actually that was, in a funny way, in a very perverse way, a blessing. But then the question came, well, when should we open? And there was a point in the history, or in the kind of emotional history of New York, where you stopped postponing events out of reverence for the people who had died, and started scheduling events to show everybody that life was going to go on, and we were going to continue to forge ahead, devil take the hindmost. And we decided that that was going to happen on November 11th, I think it was. So it was just 2 months after the event. And everybody said, oh, don't do that, no, it's too early. And I said, no, this is the right time. We did a lot of programming on Afghanistan and so forth. And I remember the current president of Afghanistan coming to do a program for us. We did it at the Union Club because we didn't have the space here, but we did it right afterwards. And Ashraf Ghani was the perfect guy. Everybody was groping for information about Afghanistan and what was happening. And so we felt that we were, in front of things that way. But when the building actually opened, it still wasn't really quite ready, but it opened, and it was, for me, a very proud moment. I had three chairmen. One was John Whitehead, who I knew from State Department days, and I think was instrumental in getting me to come here. My background with Whitehead was, when he came as Deputy Secretary of State, I was George Shultz's executive secretary. And Schultz brought Whitehead to my office and said, your job is to teach this man about the strange ways and cultures of this building. And so I said, fine. And Whitehead was this nice, pleasant-looking man and so forth. And so I thought, well, I will train him by giving him all of the difficult tasks and decisions that his predecessor did not make. And this was easy to do because I was in charge of the movement of paper in the building, and so I sent him all of these difficult things in his area. In his area were personnel, budget, very, difficult anodyne, management, also Eastern Europe and so forth. He took all of these on. He loved making decisions. He made decisions in such a way that everybody else thought it was their idea. And so he was one of the most successful deputy secretaries of state that anybody knew, but also substantively very sharp, very sharp. As chairman of the Asia Society, he presided. He never tried to, inject himself in any particular decisions. But he oversaw, I think, the growth and the development of a successful organization. Hank is a results-oriented person, and he had already been a trustee of the society for 26 years and was deeply interested in Asia. And I knew him from my days in the Philippines because he had big interest in the Philippines, used to come frequently, and he was very supportive. These were very weird and wobbly times in the Philippines, and Hank was a very steady figure out there and supported the new government and kept things going well. We had a corporate conference in Korea, and Hank Greenberg was the chairman at the time, and Hank was very attached to his dog, and Hank wanted to make sure that his dog got to the dinner of this conference, but the dinner was being attended by the head of state, and the local security people were adamant about this. But in any case, in the event, Snowball came to the banquet, and the conference was a big success. Koreans have a very direct way of negotiating. Hank was very, as I would say, results-oriented. His meetings resembled a boy going along a picket fence with a stick, going from one agenda item to the other. And he didn't want to waste a lot of time, but he wanted to get results and so forth. Some of the board members chafed under this regime and so forth, but we did very well during that time, and he was very generous. He was very generous about this building, in fact. Anyway, then his time came, and then Dick Holbrooke came, and Dick was an old colleague of mine, and I knew Dick, warts and all, and he persuaded me to stay an extra 2 years. Dick Holbrooke was a totally different personality, and I had worked with Dick for many years in his Asian incarnation, East Asian incarnation, and then he came and when he became very interested in Pakistan and so forth, and Afghanistan. That was after my time, but he was chosen really by Hank, who admired his courage and his ability to get things done. And my big problem with Dick was that Dick wanted to be the president of the Asia Society as well as being the chairman of the board. So we did a certain amount of fighting, but we all worked that out in the end. And he had a much more hands-on attitude about this place and this building and the signage, and the seating at the tables and all the things than Hank or Whitehead ever had. He was a bully too. I mean, let's be honest about it. But he loved this place, and he brought a lot of people into this place who would never have thought of it otherwise. And he gave us a big jolt of his own energy before he left. So I'm a big Holbrooke fan, but I also knew him very well. Well, I think the Asia Society has taught a lot of people what they wanted to know about Asia. And what they want to know is more and more every day. Asia Society is central to the entire relationship because it adds a very important people-to-people element to what is a growing link between the governments. If you look at, let's just take the China relationship as an example, and you can extrapolate this to the other countries, but every day an aircraft takes off from the U.S. to go to Asia every 24 minutes in this country. And if you're looking specifically at China, you have to say that somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 people go back and forth every day across the Pacific to do something. Now, these people are not, these are mostly private people. They're not government officials. But they're going to do things that come naturally to them and that are in their interest. Whether it's to, buy textiles or play basketball or make movies or finance a bank or invest or buy a container full of bras. I mean, you name it. And that's what makes these relationships go and grow. And the Asia Society speaks to those and speaks to those populations that move. And it also speaks to the governments as well. So I think we're in a good place. I thought it was the best job I'd ever had. And to move from great big embassies and to an organization where you could do whatever you wanted as long as you could pay for it. That was small and nimble enough so that you could really make it up and make things happen was, to me, a total delight.